with so much thanks for you to come, really welcoming you all. Wanting to thank too my friends from Kansas City that have come, and Robert who's come from all the way from Fort Smith, and all of you who've come. And just to thank Kelly and Donna and Leslie and Daniel, who's going to be doing some videography on this so we can share it some more later. I really have wanted to have time to dialogue with you all and not just to speak with you. So I called the library and found out that after this is over in about an hour and 15 or 20 minutes, we've got another hour or so where if you want to come up and share with me here your experiences of attunement or questions or things that you'd like me to go into a little bit more, particularly about the scientific aspect of what I'll be talking about today, we'll have time to do that. And also back at the back table, I put some of the books that I've referred to or will refer to in this talk, and also the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance. Ginny and John have put some information back there about the recent press release, which I'll be sharing a little bit from. And Arkansas Citizens Climate League has brought some information too about their work, which is really important, both entirely relevant to what I'm sharing today. Attunements for the earth isn't just something that's airy-fairy, it's something that draws from intuition, all right, but needs to be expressed in very practical action as well. So that's what climate change is calling us to do, is every possible creative response that we can generate. It's calling us, in particular, to turn to the catalyzing intelligence of nature. And I wrote this book, which is presently a free ebook, which you can find on my website. Later on, it'll be in printed form. But I wrote this really to share my experiences of the practice of attunement. There are going to be a lot of ways that you can think of this without using that word. Receptivity, intuition, but really, however we experience this ability to be in touch and connected, really it's largely unexplored in terms of how it might be able to further serve the earth going forward at this really dire time. So the book is about attunement, and it begins with a series of letters that introduce readers to a place some of you may have heard of, the Findhorn Community in Scotland, and my experience of learning attunement there. And these letters offer poetry writing prompts and exercises to heighten awareness to the natural world, and they also include some descriptions that I'll briefly share of several groundbreaking regenerative approaches to climate change mitigation. The book also shares some of my accounts of experiences of attunement and a selection of poems that I've written for the planet that I felt were relevant to this. And I get to do some songs too. And in the ebook, you can actually hear the songs because they're PDFs that can be clicked on there. So those can be directly accessed. And I really wrote this book to inspire you to practice your own little pauses, your little sacred pauses, to connect further with the earth and to develop a more conscious relationship with the energies of nature. It's a collaborative work. It includes a pioneering scientific study I'll refer to on the role of intuition in informing climate science, initiated by me and conducted and written by the neuroscientist and parapsychologist Julia Mossbridge, and Leslie Oelsner's photographs brighten the whole venture. I'm so pleased to also have some of the artwork in the book of my late friend, the Kansas landscape artist Robert Sudlow, who is probably the most attuned person I ever met, a complete natural. So as I go along here, one thing I'd like you to consider, it might be, what is your easiest, most natural way to already feel connected, to already feel attuned? Because we don't necessarily want to draw on a particular method or approach that I'm sharing, but rather just consider what you're already doing that really allows you to get into that sweet spot of receptivity. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so you can see the book is in 5 sections, and I want to just draw your attention to the 4th. I give a little introduction to this, and then comes Julia's study that she did with John Vivanco called Can We Heal the Earth with Intuition? Case report of an intuition-guided approach to enhancing exploration in climate science. And we'll end, or actually intersperse all the way through different songs. So I guess over the time I've realized that for all of us in various ways, revelation occurs. Episodes of telepathy sometimes, confirmed intuitions, precognitions, certainly deep communion with nature and with other people. Times of heightened awareness, what some people might call sudden grace, inner guidance. All of these capacities that we have innately can revise our understanding of what's possible for us and remind us of an undivided element in ourselves. With this in mind, I'm going to share some stories with you of my own experiences of this. Leslie and I have been keeping gardens here since we arrived in the Ozarks in 1979, and the place, we just love it so much. It's climax oak forests, caves, springs. We often pause as we're gardening or spending time in the woods and just feel what Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist teacher, called interbeing, our interbeing with this area. I've been, ever since 3 Mile Island, I've been involved here in environmental issues. So it's been, I guess, about 43 years. And I'm really convinced that we can add some degree of positive influence through our loving communion with the earth in ways that totally inform and can strengthen our grassroots environmental and political activism. And in fact, the proceeds from the book, once it's available in printed form, are going to be going to a group that we've been supporting and appreciating called the Wild Foundation, which all over the world is bringing different policymakers and countries into more and more willingness to preserve wild land, which is an absolute necessity for keeping the integrity of the planet at least where it is, if not helping to restore it. And to a group where I originally shared the poetry and the letters, the Institute for Poetic Medicine. It's a group that I love very much, been really involved in, which approaches poetry not so much as something that needs to be written in a great polished form, but in its therapeutic aspect, and how much expression can bring forth what's in us and which needs to be expressed and come out. So the next slide, if you please. There she is. This is Dorothy McLean. She was one of the 3 co-founders of the Findhorn Community. How many of you have heard of the Findhorn Community? Whoa. How many of you were here in 1980 and attended either the concert for Dorothy when she came to stay with us or went to the workshop that she gave? Anybody? I think there might have been about 200 people that came to the concert, and then about 30 of us or 40 came to the workshop. Anyway, it was in 1969 that I met Dorothy when I went to the Findhorn Community. And she taught what she called attunement. How it began for her was that she spent about 10 years working with meditation and connection with what she called the living silence. I like this phrase, but we could also say it was being with a capital B that she attuned to, or the ground of being. In any event, she discovered after 10 years of dedicated connection with this, that it was possible for her to feel into the life of any given being that comes from that source. And so without her feeling like she was constantly correct about everything that she experienced, she opened herself up, and when there were needs in the garden, or when there was a wish to feel in more connection and harmony with, say, the area itself, which was on a sandy kind of strand near the Findhorn Bay, she first went to this living silence, this place of capital B, being, and then she opened herself to the intention to be in touch with whatever it was. And so when I first met her, at the community, my experience of attunement was first that we would get together in the garden before working, and we'd hold hands, and we'd just go to a quiet place. We weren't looking for some kind of nirvanic perfection, but just to quiet down a little bit and attune ourselves to the situation in the present. That would include each other, the place, the garden, the tools that we were working with. And then we just hold an intention very briefly to be in connection with that, and we'd lapse back into this receptive space. And after a few minutes, we would begin our work. The impressive thing about this to me, and in addition to the interior experience, was the fact that the garden was getting famous a couple of years before I had come. What I guess you would call the county extension agent here, came and checked out the soil, which was mostly just a little bit of grass clippings, some seaweed strewn over this sandy ground. And it tested out completely satisfactorily, even for the rare trace elements that you would normally expect to find in a really good garden. It was considered impossible at that time, and it got the interest of the British Soil Association, of organic gardeners. And then later on, it developed an even wider range of interest for people because a young man named Paul Hawken, who you may have heard of because of his book, Drawdown, wrote a book about the Findhorn community called The Magic of Findhorn. It talked about the enormous size of some of the vegetables that grew there. It was all quite amazing, and I saw it, I think we saw it as a demonstration of some kind. Maybe a little bit in some ways like a non-scientific demonstration of what Cleve Baxter was doing back then, where he had a control group of certain plants that heard certain kinds of discordant music and others that heard more beautiful music or had wonderful, loving feelings sent to them versus another group of plants that didn't, of the same kind, and there were real differentials in terms of their growth. So this was very much happening, but the overall feeling was one of an ambient field of love and cooperation, and it's what I like to think of as a blessing field. And I like to think of our gathering today as a blessing field too. Some of you were very much in a blessing field yesterday if you attended Hank Kaminsky's celebration. So the next slide, please, dear. Yeah, they're the two other co-founders of the Findhorn Community, Peter and Eileen Caddy. So while I was there, I saw the way that cultivating more harmonious, open states of mind can infuse our environment with greater well-being. And what are the implications of this for our climate crisis? That's what I'm exploring. I don't entirely know, of course. Some of you in this group will already have been exploring this for a long time, and I'm aware of that. When she did come and visited us in Arkansas in 1980, Dorothy taught us attunement. Again, she described it as a really simple process, going within. All the best approaches to inwardness are simple. And going within to this quiet place and getting in touch with the living silence. And then we held intentions to be connected, and the group decided that we would at some point, we decided to connect with what we call the spirit of the Ozarks. I think at Findhorn they might have called it the overlighting energy of the Ozarks. But at any rate, everybody dropped into the silence, held this intention to do so, dropped that little intention just kind of like a letter you drop into a mailbox. Let it go. You can't hold on to your letter and expect it to get anywhere. And finally, we just relaxed. And it was really interesting after this, as people shared their impressions of the spirit of the Ozarks. I remember so many people felt like there was a kind of feminine quality to the area, the underground springs, the caves, the particular kind of roll of the hills. Anyway, as we were learning about this, Dorothy gave us a little bit more advice. Don't marginalize anything that you experience in this process of receptivity. Don't consider anything too far out. Just be open. If nothing comes, this isn't about ponying up an experience. you may find that nothing coming leads you into an even deeper silence, which is even more radiant, even more helpful. So this is an experience in some ways of just trusting yourself. And there have got to be endless ways to attune, and there also surely must be almost endless ways to experience whatever kind of response comes. It could be an insight, an impression, an image, a word, the felt sense of a particular presence, goosebumps, energetic sensations of different kinds. So, one of the things that Dorothy did a lot over the years was that as she was getting whatever kinds of impressions she got, which were pretty much nonverbal, as I understand it, she kind of grounded them by what she sketched down. She wrote down little notes. She advised us to do that too, which was a nice bridge for me when I started working with the poets in my writing group with Attunement. And she thought of this as a sort of translation process from subtle impulses or impressions into language. I found it very grounding. I found it helpful. So I'm going to share some things that I've written at different times too. Let's see here. We go on to the next slide. Yeah, might be a good time to conjure Findhorn a bit. This actually is a photograph that Leslie took at Findhorn Bay. And here's a poem. Findhorn Bay, Scotland. Deer flow ghostly over silent dunes. Owls announce positions from dark perches in the pines. Fluent clouds surge over morning surf. 2 rainbows in a photo weren't there when she took it. You'll see that photo later. Exultant V's of geese loft over us, then gone. Last purple heather lanterns light the land. Everything presents itself. Everything presents itself in one white, edgeless pebble. Leslie, the next slide, please. Let's see. No, I want Daniel and Thomas and Albert. Here's your. Well, I'll just have to tell you about them, I guess. Okay. All right. That's all right. Yeah, okay. So part of the work I've been doing in the last 10, 12 years has been working with different key people, authors, change agents, people that travel the world, going to different demonstration projects, to some of the major climate change conferences, talking with policymakers about different kinds of regenerative approaches to agricultural and marine restoration. And these are 3 people that I was going to show you a picture of. One is named Albert Bates. Some of his books are back there. The book that I write about in my book of Albert's is called Transforming Plastic. I also have his book, 2 books, in fact, of Albert's on biochar. If Albert Bates sounds familiar to some of you, if any of you know the history of the farm in Summertown, Tennessee, you'll know that he's been a key figure there and did some of the real early anti-nuclear research and work, which I also have been involved in here in Arkansas through the Dogwood Alliance, People's Action for Safe Energy. Another one of the people whose invisible photograph I'd love you to see is Thomas Garreau. He's the son of a woman who was a marine biologist, and his work has been with coral reef restoration. I don't really want to take time to go into detail about the implications of what he's done, but his book, Innovative Systems of Marine Ecosystem Restoration, is back there, and it's an edited piece that shares different kinds of, or different examples of that work by different people who've done it around the world. And finally, Daniel Wall has written a book that's really more broadly applicable called Designing Regenerative Cultures. I'm really proud to have been able to support these people, to help them get time to write their books, and at certain points to distribute their books to a lot of thought leaders And I met all of them, really, except for Tom Garreau, through a group called the Findhorn Fellows, connected with the Findhorn Community, through whom I also connected with Paul Hawken. So in my book, you'll see and hear the lyrics and the audio file of me singing my musical review of Drawdown, his book. Paul's actually moved on. He's not with the Drawdown Project anymore. That's happening, but he's working doing an incredible website, which to me is the most comprehensive and hopeful thing I've seen, called regeneration.org. I really encourage you to see it. Having said all of this, I want to say too that none of these people are looking through rose-colored glasses at all. They know much more than I do how serious the situation is, but they're damn well not stopping, putting forward their best energy. We have some people like that here too today. And another musical review, or something that I tried to do for the Citizens Climate Lobby, the Carbon Fee and Cashback song, is also in the book. You can hear me do that. And one other piece on biochar in the book like that. So I just wanted to share that dimension of it, and I'd like to do a song. So you guys can come on up while I introduce. I found a poem that my grandma had written down that I'd written when I was about 14 or 15 years old that had the phrase "tangled time" in it. And it's what led to this song. This is the first of two songs I'm going to share with you, in which I was trying to find space in myself and express both the grief and sorrow that I'm feeling about what's happening to the earth, and the hope that I feel as a power inside of me, and I hope you will feel it too in yourself. But how to let both of those things live inside of us at the same time became the particular task of my writing this song, called Song in a Tangled Time. Okay. Well, you know, before the Northwest Arkansas Times was online, the first word of this song was leafing, and now it's scrolling through our local morning paper, looking for good news, finding virus and crime, climate change denial and deception. What a tangled web in a desperate changing time. Oh, hey, tangled web at a turning point in time. So many people getting the short end now, misled by those who tried to keep us blind, with lies and walls and convoluted mazes. It's hard to see straight in a twisted time. Oh, to see the simple truth in a tangled time. And I want to be singing a simple song, singing a hopeful song. Oh, and I want to be singing a song of love and peace to heal your heart and mind. May we sing a simple song in this tangled time. Waves of sorrow sometimes overtake us as oceans swallow more and more shoreline. We're gonna have to fan the fires of hope inside us. What a slippery slope we're gonna have to climb. Whoa, to make it through to a more enlightened time. And I wanna be singing a simple song, singing a hopeful song. Whoa, and I wanna be singing a song of love and peace to heal your heart and mind. May we sing a simple song in this tangled time. Now that Carolina wren outside our window, perched up where the high wisteria twines, sings her sunrise song in a radiant rapture. She sings her simple song in the tangled vines, sipping on a green tea on a frosty morning. I watch as dawn throws rainbows through the pines, and I hear her cheerful song of celebration as the happy birds absorb the warm sunshine. They begin to sing along with her in time, singing a simple song, hopeful, singing a hopeful song, joyful, singing a joyful song. Oh, and I want to be singing the song of love and peace to heal your land and mine. May we sing a simple song in this tangled time. I hear the heart of life inside them singing. Their joy rings out as the living daylight climbs. My spirits lift as I rest here in this blessing, and I watch my worried, wound up mind unwind. Oh, their joyful song just takes me out of time. Singing a simple song, hopeful, singing a hopeful song, joyful, singing a joyful song, blessing, singing a blessing song. Oh, and I want to be singing a song of love and peace to heal your land and mine. May we sing a simple song in this tangled time. Let's try it with me. Singing a simple song, hopeful, singing a hopeful song, joyful, singing a joyful song, blessing, singing a blessing song. Oh, and I want to be singing a song of love and peace to heal your land and mine. May we sing a simple song in this tangled time. About this program, and really it seemed like the heart of it would be songs and stories and poems. And here's the story. Sometimes things just kind of grab you by the collar and say, come over here. And my first strong confirmation of intuition that I can remember happened when I was a senior in high school in 1967 in Kansas City. And it was lunchtime. I was sitting at the science teacher's table, which in retrospect seems important because he was affected by this too, what happened. And an announcement was made at the end of lunch. There was going to be a big prize drawing tomorrow. I don't remember for what, but anyway, we were shown a large glass jar filled with beans and invited to guess the exact number of beans in it. And whoever was going to guess the closest would win. And so we all had to write down the number we thought it would be. And I don't know what happened to me, but I said to the whole table clearly and with complete confidence, it's 452. Remember, I said that tomorrow, 452. This just came brushing out of me. Fast forward, next day, same place. We sit at the science teacher's table, and I remind the guys again, Remember, it's 452, and it was. And, a lot of people might summarily reject this kind of thing as just being amazing, kind of against the odds situation. But for me, I really vibed in on the possibility of precognition then. Precognition is interesting. And maybe in this case, it was actually clairaudient precognition, which would be the ability to hear something before it's said. But both, to me, precognition and dowsing are the kind of thing you can kind of take to the bank, because they're either right or they're wrong. I'm especially interested in this kind of paranormal phenomenon. If a dowser says you got to go 25 feet and then you'll hit water and it'll be flowing at 5 gallons a minute or whatever, and they're right, that's amazing. And it really did open me up. Another opening happened here when I was a VISTA volunteer in Fort Smith. The first thing I did here was I worked with Acorn as a community organizer down there in 1979, and I was sleeping on a mat on the floor of an older home there, and one night I wake into a lucid dream. I'll read this. I'm in my grandmother Helen Oelsner's apartment in Kansas City. I can't ever remember dreaming about her before. I didn't know what state of health she was in. Grandma and I are standing. We're looking deep into each other's eyes, soul deep. And I'm singing her an ecstatic song in a language I don't know. Speaking in tongues, the Hebrew of her youth, I really don't know. The song's about setting sail on the great cosmic ocean, a stream of deep communion and what feels like blessing flows between us two. And then I wake up in the darkened Fort Smith home and I have to go pee-pee. So I get up, and while I'm up, I look at my watch. And in the morning, I'm wakened by a phone call from my parents. They've called to break the news that Grandma died last night. And before they can tell me the time, I asked them if it was around the time I'd had that dream, and yep, it was exactly at that time. This was my first experience and not the last, and not because of anything that I intended consciously, of being present at the death of a loved one while at a distance. And I know people here in this audience, not only who have had this experience, but have a more conscious kind of a capacity to allow this experience to happen. And always have had great respect for people that do have that capacity. Now I'm going to do another song. And this one, it's very current right now. When I wrote the Buffalo River hymn with the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance, and of course the river in mind, years back, we were trying to rid ourselves of the hog farm there, which was polluting the groundwater and was going to be polluting the river if it wasn't already. And that's gone. But there's a press release in the back that Ginny and John have worked on and brought of a suit that the Buffalo River Watershed Alliance has filed against the Forest Service. Just reading from that, 40,000-acre Roberts Gap project in the headwaters of the Buffalo National River, which includes approximately 11,000 acres of timber thinning and harvest, 11,000 acres of prescribed burning, 70 miles of road construction for timber removal, 20 miles of dozer lines for fire breaks, and very relevant to this song, 3,000 acres of herbicide treatment, which endanger that river. So that, as you'll see from the good old bumper stickers back there, Save the Buffalo, we still need to be working on that. And here's a song called Buffalo River Hymn. It's just because I'm so aware of seeing you out there and knowing some of your sensitivities and to some degree, how deeply you care. Buffalo River roams, gathering green. Kingfisher flaps past leafy tapestries. In this ancient valley, where so many lives have been, we must protect the buffalo, keep her waters running clean. mist on the river, tangled in the trees. There's a solitary egret here and something unseen. Fog fans the valley, it floats out over the corn. Something deathless rests here on this cold October morn. Honeycomb colors streak the limestone river cliffs. Lightning struck survivors jut from the towering bluffs. Go up on the high cliffs overlooking the fields. The land glows golden as the sun reveals. There's a shine of silence all around her head. Steeped in peace she meditates with a steady breath. And it's a filling up her body like a slow flowing stream, fading into the clear blue sky like a disappearing dream. Petals on the water float by our campground. We're sitting here in heaven at the center of a sound of white waters roaring through the rapids far below, crashing around the rocks in an unbroken flow. Here we go. Now it's raining on the river, hear the wind's one song, swerving around the river bend, and then it's gone. Go over and over, the rain sways down, blessing our heads and the trees' green crown. Dusk drenches the day and pours down a dark wine. It hushes this valley and it quiets our minds. This wired world can be a hard place to be. This peace dissolves the distance between you and me. Buffalo River waters roam, reflecting green. We gather by the campfire as night resets the scene. In this ancient valley where so many lives have been, we must protect the buffalo, keep her waters a-running clean. Buffalo River waters run pure and pristine. Don't you let them be fouled by herbicides, what an ecocidal scheme. In this ancient valley where so many lives have been, we must protect the buffalo, keep her waters a-running clean. Oh, thank you. Please do. Oh yeah, I'd love to.
Okay.
Sorry if I didn't.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say a few words here. That I know that appreciating the beauty of nature with a camera is a very natural way of attunement that many of us already do. I was delighted that Geoff asked me to contribute some photos to the book, and in it you'll see that each picture relates to a particular poem or description, but here in the slideshow you'll just see a flow of images. They won't necessarily relate to what Geoff is talking about, but it's pictures I've taken over many years in places ranging from the Ozarks to Iceland, and gosh, unfortunately, you won't see the real colors because we can't make it pitch dark in here, of course. But I hope you feel inspired at nature's beauty as you're watching. And, please remember that when you take pictures of nature, you're offering your love to nature, and that actually matters. And there's a quote I want to read from Eckhart Tolle from his book Stillness Speaks that expresses it really, really well. You need nature as your teacher to help you reconnect with being, with that capital B again. But not only do you need nature, it also needs you. Whoop, taking off the glasses. You are not separate from nature. We are all part of the one life that manifests itself in countless forms throughout the universe, forms that are all completely interconnected. When you recognize the sacredness, the beauty, the incredible stillness and dignity in which a flower or a tree exists, you add something to the flower or the tree. Through your recognition, your awareness, nature too comes to know itself. It comes to know its own beauty and sacredness through you. Nature can bring you to stillness. That is its gift to you. When you perceive and join with nature in the field of stillness, that field becomes permeated with your awareness. That is your gift to nature.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'd like to share some poems. This one I wrote for Leslie on the night of the election returns, 2016 presidential election. For many of us, a bummer would be a total downer. However, this is a poem about attuning in some respects to listening, and through listening to something that was deeper and really reassuring. It's called Well Held. Well held, longing for darkness alone. She retires her candle, going undercover, to think back on a walk she took in the cold gray before dawn, finding hoof prints set in freshly fallen snow along a trail they laid across the steep hillside in the woods behind their home. Now night winds heave the forest slopes. She hears the hills that hold her in their sweep, well held in living darkness. Her longing becomes belonging. This next one here is probably going to be one of the most common and beloved ways that we connect with nature, through particular trees. Now, I know sometimes people do this through pets. You may connect with nature through your own body. Obviously, that's part of nature. But there was this big old oak tree, one of the largest ones in the neighborhood, right behind our place on Vandevetter. When our children were very small, I'd sometimes go and look at that tree, or maybe touch one of its branches and feel something of the strength and something of the calming qualities of that big old oak. And I wrote this where, in a way, I guess I really attuned to the tree and, of course, to myself and the surrounding area by way of writing the poem itself, too. Oak angel, tree at our window, presiding oak, you stand before me, a branching of brown roads, and tell me my roots cannot fail thirst, for in the earth our life is. Old angel, you were singing in the crush of day, as you are now in the rose church of twilight. But only now I hear. While we sleep, you walk the deep world breezes, night's cool hand on the brow of our city. And one more poem I want to share, a kind of chronological trip we took morning to twilight through the Flint Hills an area I really love in Kansas. And just to say a little bit about the poem, in the first stanza, it's clear that the person there who I either projected this or I had some subtle impressions of a person who attuned by way of sleep and dreams and half sleep and wind. And in the second stanza, I think the person there was attuning by way of a feeling for the land and a sense of that, of the sweep of the land. And in the third stanza, I believe that that person, whether real or imagined by me, was in tune with that animal power that so many people feel a connection with, the red-tailed hawk. And so that might lend itself to an experience of things seen from above, looking down. And in the fourth stanza, another attunement through trees, not only above the earth, but below the earth. And finally, in the fifth stanza, the heart of the matter. In fact, maybe the heart of matter itself. It speaks of the attunement through love. And following that, those of you who heard Joanne give us the gift, Joanne Kaminsky, yesterday of reading from the children's book, following that invisible string of love, that's the carrier frequency. That's the essential attunement. So, guardians. As we drove toward Council Grove, I thought, seeing darkness deep in a morning window, living there is one who, caved in to himself at night, becomes winds rivering through cottonwoods across Kansas, nameless guardian of stream banks and gullies. And later, as we turned into Waukene, I felt brush past me hints of one who holds the entire sway of grasses on this plain, prayers appearing in their sheen, open in her mind, as she sits in a porch swing somewhere near the trembling of roads. We headed west through crosswinds past wheat's gold inscriptions, spying traces in that tall afternoon of one who wheels across cumulus on wings of red-tailed hawks, scattering visions like rain on the earth below. From a distant farmhouse, walled in a windbreak, broodings rose up at twilight of one who holds or one who wears the wet weave of roots gently as her own veins, siphoning life into their outstretched branches. So, on the unsheltered plain, each soul that wakens in its cradle of flesh aligns with space and is drawn out into the guardianship of what it loves most deeply. That was mullein there a moment ago. Mullein has been probably for me the plant that I've connected with the most in the Ozarks. Very soft, very gentle. It's helped that in me, which is not particularly soft or gentle in many cases. I wanted to share a little bit from section 4, the role of intuition in evolving climate science. Actually, the piece itself that Julia wrote is a bit technical, and I just decided I had to include it in the book. It's a groundbreaking piece, and in conferring with different people involved in the field of parapsychology, I think it's the first thing that anybody remembers seeing that really brings together very experienced intuitives, people with a real track record of working for intelligence or for, in some cases, counterterrorism work for the FBI, doing different kinds of intuitive work that's been very important, with atmospheric physicists, climate scientists, and modelers. So I did include that, but before that I tried to write a more of a kind of a lay account for people of what it was all about, and a little bit of an introductory background. In the early 80s, I read a book called Psychic Archaeology. It was another one of these things where some people really nailed it, and I found out that there was a whole history of archaeologists who are open-minded in different places, working with intuitives, who would say, much like a dowser would, dig here, go down to this depth, and you'll find such and such. And of course, some of them are wrong, but one of them in particular was very, very correct a lot of the time. I got in touch with this guy when I was working with another fellow on a 7-year project, a book called Fighting Radiation with Foods, Herbs, and Supplements that we wrote. And he gave me some input on 10 questions I had about radio protection from radioactive isotopes. Anyway, my interest at that point was ignited in the possibility of doing something altruistic with these gifts, something to relieve human suffering, improve quality of life. I didn't know much about climate change at that point. Well, in 1998, I began to pursue this a little more. I took an introductory week at a place called the Monroe Institute in Virginia. Some of you might know about this place. Robert Monroe, who founded this with other people, had a lot of experience with very conscious out-of-the-body travel and other paranormal abilities. And so I was there for a week, and I was learning about some of these things and experiencing a little bit of it. And we had about 30 people in the group, and we were introduced one day to a guy named Joseph McMoneagle, who for 19 years was the senior and most frequently accurate remote viewer in our government's classified Project Stargate remote viewing intelligence gathering program. He saved a lot of lives. He spoke for a while about his work. He gave examples of his abilities. And then he described the program that he was involved in and invited us to do something similar to what they had done. He gave the 30 of us 6 numbers as coordinates for a target that we were supposed to remote view. We weren't told anything else. We were given 3 numbers for longitude, 3 numbers for latitude. I don't even know the difference to this day between longitude and latitude, honestly. So, so I sank into a quiet state and clearly envisioned a huge cylindrical, roughly grooved stone outcropping. And we were given some more coordinates, and this time I seemed to be just inches away from this shining, smooth, metallic surface which arched way up into the air from a concrete base. And there were 2 people. There was a lady from Italy and I who described most exactly what the 2 targets turned out to be, the Devil's Tower in Wyoming and the St. Louis Arch. And just like the other things I've told you about, this wasn't something that I just suddenly was, oh yeah. It was like, it really got my attention. And I was just curious, how can this kind of precision be possible? And how might these capacities be applied to scientific research? Break down those compartments that are there? We know that scientists, many of them are intuitive, but there are great big taboos in academia and among other scientists in many cases about being explicit about these capacities. So Joe and his remote viewing colleagues worked under what were called blind tasking, rigorously controlled conditions, where they weren't generally told anything about the questions they were being asked. In some cases, they weren't even given coordinates. And intricate kinds of safeguards from the picking up telepathically from the people who had written down, you know, the information that was wanted. Things like that were brought into play. They were developed very carefully at the Stanford Research Institute early on with an amazing remote viewer named Ingo Swann and some wonderful physicists who were really open, Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff. I could say a lot about this, but basically what happened was I got back in touch with McMoneagle after a few years as I was beginning to understand how severe accelerating humanly caused climate change is. And I asked him to work with me, and we worked together for 5 years with a particular atmospheric physicist whose work has been so famous that I've always kept it under my hat, his name, with a few exceptions. And we worked from his questions, and this is an important project. It was a beginning, because his project hadn't been operationalized other than a demonstration or 2. It really didn't have the same kind of cloud or possible benefits that I wished it had, but I felt like it was a great start, and I learned a hell of a lot from McMoneagle, just being around him. So then, in 2019, I met another brilliant person. I had a lot of possible connections I could have made with mediums and with different psychics, but I really was, I followed my intuition, and my intuition finally in 2019 connected me with a woman named Julia Mossbridge, who you can look up, you can see her on YouTube. She's a fellow of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS, and has been involved in a lot of academic situations, and has worked especially in the realm of precognitive remote viewing. So again, because she's working with people who have the ability that's been proven in different circumstances to be accurate, we had to be so careful not to let people know even the topics that we were asking questions about. And the questions were 10, and they came from 2 other atmospheric physicists who were also climate modelers, had a lot of different peer-reviewed articles out, and were really, really interesting people. One of them is an accomplished practitioner of yoga, open-minded, right? And another is a person I like very much who actually was interested in remote viewing and learned something about it. So I helped to fund, and I basically initiated this study. And the results were published in an abbreviated form, which I share a bit of, and then in a more extensive piece, which I also share. But the thing I'd like to make really clear here is that our aim was really not to prove that psychic functioning was happening during the project. It was simply to provide climate scientists with new ways of thinking about old problems. And I feel that it did. I'll share more with you if you're interested a little later on about this, but I thought one of the great takeaways from this was question 3. Some of the answers that came from the impressions that, in this case, 5 of the 7 remote viewers gave to this question that they didn't know they were answering. And the question was, assuming we solve climate change in the future, describe the most crucial piece of information or technology needed to do so we can potentially take action in this direction. And I don't want you to think for a minute that I think all of this is correct or that I think all of this is in some way a panacea or the answer. Not at all. I am hoping that this kind of study leads to much better studies. But one of the takeaways is it appears that the transcripts describe 2 major changes. One, in the future, a critical number of climate scientists will agree that the best approach is to develop a biological solution or solutions, very much along the lines of what regenerative agriculturalists, marine biologists, and others are working on. And 2, really intriguingly, the use of potentially bioluminescent diatoms or dinoflagellates, microorganisms just flooding the oceans, embedded in some kind of flat but flexible gel-like substrate to create an energy source, a free energy, clean energy source. What was so fascinating, and what I can describe but would like you to see later, I brought the sketches along with me if you'd like to see them, that they made, there was such parallelism in some of the drawings that they did, and all 5 of them came up with sketches indicative of this second potential for diatoms to help generate some kind of energy that hasn't been at this point. And if there are any marine biologists with very open minds in our company here, if you know anybody, I'm actually looking for somebody to look at this material and hopefully bring it forward. There's a lot more to be shared here. I think I won't right now, but we'll do a song. And it may take a little editing on our video, but I've been challenged a bit with arthritis. And sometimes it's not so easy for me to get through these songs. So I've got Kelly and Donna and Leslie to help me out here. I'd like you to just kind of Cross your fingers for me. This one is a companion piece to Song in a Tangled Time. It's called Night Sky Medicine. A lot of times when I've been disturbed or out of sorts, I've just gone lie down on the ground and look up at the stars and get a larger perspective. And I think that's exactly what I was looking for in this song. I kept working on this song and working on it, and it never seemed to work. I was trying to bring those two things together again, sorrow and distress, and also hope and some kind of inner peace. And I just kept working on the song until I finally realized I was really working on myself. Yeah. And at that point, with a little gap in time, the song fell together. And it starts. See the starry firmaments rising in the mystery, abiding in the night. See the starry firmaments rising in the mystery, abiding in the night. Appaloosa sky tonight, north wind riding, moon in view, then in hiding, hello Luna peekaboo, see you later soon, bright sky rider, Appaloosa moon, glory hallelujah, Appaloosa moon. Oh, the moon's a wild horse tonight, riding through the ragged clouds, across the starry course, and up a cloudy draw. The moon's a piebald horse tonight, racing through the black and white, illuminating strange, swirling runes of light. Read the rolling runes with me of crisis and catastrophe, of rising seas and falling trees, going. Oh, but see the rolling runes with me of icy cloud calligraphy, foretell new opportunities to make our way to dawn. Appaloosa sky tonight, north wind riding, moon in view, then in hiding, hello Luna peekaboo, see you later soon, bright sky rider, Appaloosa moon, glory hallelujah, Appaloosa moon. Now the moon has run a race, and the cloudy runes depart, dissolving in the dark. Let your naked mind alone and listen to the silence tone, the universal bell. Rest your worry for the world and listen for the call from home, the reassuring undertone that tells us all is well. Oh, not a cloud in sight tonight, diamond shining, open view, nothing hiding, hallelujah here and now, mystery on high, glory hallelujah, all through the night. Starry hallelujah, all through the night. Oh, not an end in sight tonight, calm abiding, open view, nothing hiding. Hallelujah, here and now, mystery on high, glory, hallelujah, all through the night. Starry hallelujah, all through the night. See the starry firmaments rising in the mystery, abiding in the night. See the starry firmament rising in the mystery, abiding in your heart. Thanks for that. Thanks for holding me through that. Appreciate that. Oh, Lordy. This song was originally, while I massage my hand, this song was originally conceived at a multicultural gathering in the Black Hills of South Dakota in 1992. Sioux and Omaha and Athabascan and other tribal peoples were there, and there were some white people like me. And the Indian Runners for Peace and Dignity at that time were walking between reservations and battlefields and sacred sites all the way from Canada to Mexico. And they timed a visit to our campground. And they bore ceremonial staffs decorated with sacred regalia they'd been given by every tribe they'd visited along the way. And the most beautifully decorated staff was carried by a young man who was the great-great-great-great-grandson of the Lakota Sioux holy man, Nicholas Black Elk, who lived from 1863 to 1950. And some of you have probably read, I'm sure, Black Elk Speaks, John J. Neihart's rendering of what Black Elk spoke to him. Well, the runners invited us to join in a blessing ceremony. This is a recurring theme here. We stood silently together again in a great circle, and young Black Elk slowly walked around the center, carrying the staff around and around to signify the healing of the broken circle of the sacred hoop of the Sioux nations, praying in the spirit that Nicholas Black Elk had prayed when he stood on the summit of what was then called Harney Peak in South Dakota in the summer of 1931. Very moving. And the feeling in the circle deepened. A little girl across the circle from me walked over to this tall Indian runner wearing a belt with tassels of red and white and yellow and brown hanging from it. And as young Black Elk continued his prayer walk, the little girl started weaving these tassels into a beautiful unity. And the song was seeded right here at that moment. And I never tried to find words for it or music for it, but I could just feel it gestating inside of me like a featureless prayer. And 7 years later, it was born in about 20 minutes as I was camping by the banks of the Walnut River in south central Kansas at the Winfield Bluegrass Festival. And Black Elk's spiritual light has brightened a lot of lives through Black Elk Speaks and others by Nebraska poet John G. Neihardt, his friend and faithful chronicler of his visionary life. I got in touch with the Neihardt family after writing this song, and I got permission to use the photo of Black Elk on the summit. And you can see that photo at the beautiful website, neihard.com, and hear the I like to use the word seraphic voice of John G. Nyhard recite a prayer he wrote to reflect the depth of his friend Black Elk's spirituality. Harney Peak. Anybody been there? Me too. And it's the highest peak east of the Rockies in the continental U.S. And it's a place where actually at age 9, Black Elk flew in his spirit body when he had his first vision, and where he physically stood and prayed again in 1931. And Harney Peak was renamed Black Elk Peak in 2016. So I'm going to try to do this song for you, Sacred Hoop. Y'all help me out here. All right. When Black Elk stood on Harney Peak, he spanned the 4 directions. Vision grows strong as the sight goes weak, and he could hear the least inflections. Spirit voices on the wind of the severed Sioux tribes of the songs that had been. He could see all the faces, the 4 races of the world, could sense the colors of their prayers that blended. He prayed, oh, when will the sacred hoop be mended? Oh, the sacred hoop of nations, of hands and hearts entwined, lies broken with the broken treaties and the ravaged tribes. Encampments in the raging wind, their fires burning low. Oh, when will the sacred hoop be whole? Anne Frank was a young Jewish girl when the Nazis came to power, and she left a legacy in ink of those tortured, stormy hours when her people had to hide or die. She could hear the fearful boots outside. She could see all the darkness in the human heart. But she wrote, I believe we're good at the core and ended, that the light will overcome and the hoop be mended. Oh, the sacred hoop of nations, of faith and hope entwined, lies scorched in Hitler's ovens and all scattered like 12 tribes, converging in Jerusalem along the Wailing Wall. Oh, when will the sacred hoop be whole? Tangled in the branches of a twisted family tree, a child lies trembling and in tears, her abuse roots deep in the centuries of pain that passes down the line of generations back in time. We're all together on this ride, so if you feel that child inside, please go to her, she cries to be befriended. And in this way may the sacred hoop be mended. Oh, the sacred hoop of families, of feelings intertwined, lies pulled apart in the human heart by the hurt of humankind. Will the circle be unbroken? And can we heal the child's soul? When, oh when will the sacred hoop, when, oh when will the sacred hoop be whole? Now there's two good friends on a holy butte on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Seems we could see for 1,000 miles as we pray for all relations. And the prayers drift round like eagles down to the prairies and the plains below. We could feel the prayers of others there like a mighty tide of love and care, flowing like the mystery intended, flowing like the mystery intended, toward that great day when the sacred hoop is mended. Oh, the sacred hoop of a red and white, of yellow and of a brown, lies in our hands to reunite, to bind this world around. Old Black Oak looked from then to now, and he saw our common goal, to make our way to the joyful day when the sacred hoop is whole. Thank you, Kelly, Leslie, Donna. Thank you all. Gonna finish up with a poem here and just a few little thoughts. We've got a sign-up sheet in the back there if anybody's interested. I'd be happy to get together with a group of people and explore attunement more and actually do some attunement, kind of along the lines of what I was talking about happened with Dorothy back in 1980, but our own experience of it. But yes, thank you. Dawn Song for Gaia, Mother Earth. What is precious is distilled at dawn, as sun peeps over the transom of morning, and dew-wed light shines on Gaia, with her migrant cloud herds, with her azure necklace of lakes, with her tangled skein of rivers, with gushing knots of ice melt drip of thin rivulets over stone, with maze of hairy roots, heft of hoary branches, with transparencies of cricket song, bird song, and laying silence at dawn, with her spired and lucid crystal choirs. Oh, blue jewel swaying on a stalk of sunlight, Gaia. So, for me, the simpler the better. And here's my core practice. I'll just do it through the organic materials of this building. Please touch the earth with love. Thank you. Stick around if you'd like to talk. Appreciate it.